There's a tefillah. It's every single day we say this tefillah. Vayavor David es Hashem leini kol hakol. That the David Melech benched the Eibishter in front of the entire Kehillah. Yemidav Baruch Atah Hashem L'kei Yisrael. Vinu Me'el Me'olim. We know we say this every day. What was the occasion of this bracha that David Melech gave? When did this happen, and why did it happen? So in Divrei, we'll see that has a shaykhus to our parsha. But in Divrei Yamim, in Divrei Yamim Aleph, in Kapitel Chavtes, it starts off that David Melech says, "V'yem David Melech l'kol hakohol." He says, "Shleima b'ni echad." My son is only one. Bacha bar lakim nar v'rach. He's very young. V'malacha v'doyla. There's a big job ahead of us. Ki lo l'adam habiri. The Beis Hamikdash is not just for a person. Ki l'Hashem lakim. It's for Hashem. So he says, "B'kol koichi hachinoisi." I already. David Melech says, "With all my koyach, I prepared Beis Lakai hazav lazav akes lakes v'chaysh v'barzel barzel eitzim leitzim avnishayim melum." And he says, I prepared a lot of things, but he says, I have things, but there's still a little bit need for more. He's still like it was like an appeal almost. He said, after he describes what he has, it says, "Umi misnadev l'maus yodei Hashem." Who else wants to come forth to be menadev? So then it says, "V'isnadvu sorry ha'avos sorry shiftei Yisrael v'sorry alafim b'meir sorry melech samelech v'yitnu," and they gave lavadis beis lakim zav kikarim chamesh alafim v'adar koinim riboy v'kesef kikarim aser alafim v'chayshes riboy. There were tremendous donations for the Beis Hamikdash. And it says, "V'nimtzu ita avanim nasnu la'itzu beis Hashem." And it says in the pasuk, "Vayismechu am al isnadvam." They were so happy that they gave this for the Beis Hamikdash. V'yismechu am al isnadvam ki b'leiv sholem is nadval Hashem. They gave it with a leiv sholem, the nedavos for the Beis. Just talking about the Beis Hamikdash, the first Beis Hamikdash. The Gam David Melech somach simcha gedola. David Melech had a greater simcha. So Rashi explains here, in the Divrei Yomim, that b'leiv sholem, he says, b'leiv echad nosnu b'rotzin nafsham. They gave to the Beis Hamikdash with a complete heart. V'loi b'shnei levavos. They didn't donate to the Beis Hamikdash with two hearts. See, what does that mean? Sheyesh adam shenoisin bal korchai. Sometimes a person gives a donation because he's pressured to give a donation. V'loi b'nefesh chafetzi. He doesn't really want to give a donation. There's an appeal. Some people are giving, so he's embarrassed not to give. That's called shnei levavos. A person has two hearts. He has a generous heart, and at the same time he has a part of his heart that is not so happy about what he's giving. All the people that donated for the Beis Hamikdash, it was with one heart. And Gam David HaMelech Samach Simcha Gedola. So Rashi brings out, don't think he had the same simcha as them. Gam David HaMelech Samach Simcha Gedola. Yosem Mikulam. Kihu Bal HaMaisa. He was the one that organized it and made the appeal. And there was a great simcha on the donations to the Beis Hamikdash. And then it says the very next pasuk, "Vayavor David es Hashem leini kol hakol v'yem David Baruch Atah Hashem L'kei Yisrael Vinu." He gave. That's when we daven every day. It's as follows this appeal and the donations to the Beis Hamikdash. Rashi says here, "Vayavor David Hashem leini kol hakol." He says, "Vayakol David vayavorchem al his nadvam." He gave a bracha because of the nedavos. And he says here, Rashi makes diukim about it. Bracha to Hashem l'kei Yisrael avinu. Why does he chap on Yisrael? He says, why not Avram Yitzchak? Sometimes we say l'kei Avram l'kei Yaakov. Ki lefi Yaakov gam hu nada. We find that Yaakov also made nedarim. Yaakov neder. So Yaakov has a shaychus to making a nedar neder. Yisrael avinu. He says. And then he says, Hashem Hagdula. Rashi says, Nasan Shvach LaKadosh Baruch Hu, Shenasan Lei Kol Kach, Likboitz Mamen Kazel Bing Beis Mikdash. He was thanking Hashem that he was able to be so successful in making such a great appeal to the Beis Hamikdash. That's what we say every day. This was at the occasion of the donations for the Beis Hamikdash. And he says, L'chashem Magdula, Aval Pi Kikabsti Kol Amom Hazel Bin Beis Hamikdash Shniku Gdola, Atan Nesatli Kol Agdula Zayis Vagvura. You gave me the ability to fight wars, and I was able to capture and to take all the booty, the shlo, all the gold. Everything is all about this. All about this. That the Pharaohs called Shvachos Elu Shipku Al Shinos LaKadosh Baruch Hu Akayach LeKabitz Mammon LeMini Beis Hamikdash. So we see here that there was a tremendous simcha and a divas halev. How to get to this? I saw in this sefer Leket Sichos Musar, it's a Musar sefer from Rabbi Isaac Sher, who was Rosh Yeshiva in Slabodka. I don't know how long ago this is in exactly the years, but so he has a Musar sefer, and I was looking in this sefer, and he brings this when he talks about our parsha, Vayakal. It talks about Nedivas Halev, Kol Divlev, Divya. So he brings this. He gives the example of the donations by the time of the Beis Hamikdash. We're talking about in the Chumash, talking about the Mishkan, but this is happening by the Beis Hamikdash. So he brings this in. So what does he bring it in for? So he says like this, Rabbi Isaac Sher. He says when it comes to giving for the Mishkan or the Beis Hamikdash, it was an asayin. It was an asayin for people. Because Abisha said he wants Nedivas Halev, Kol Nediv Lev. He wanted people that are willing to give it with Nedivas Halev, with their whole heart. So he brings this example that by David there was a hatzlach in this, that the David Melech said that they did it with their whole heart. It was one lave they did it at that time. But it says it's an asayin. So he says, which Gemara? No.
The Gemara compares that by the ego. There's more than the deep subway.
Than by the Mishkan.
Yes, Gemara.
Also be that's a tainum. Okay, I don't think he brings that. I didn't see that he brings that.
Okay, yeah, sorry.
No, it could be. Yes. I didn't see the whole thing. So he says that here was an Nisayan, and you would think, and he explains, he brings very nicely that the Dar Deya, talking about the Dar Midbar, you would think maybe for them it would be simpler, maybe do it. So he says, not so pashut, because he says that in the Shiva Shemei Meluim, before they put up the Mishkan, they brought some karbonis, and there was a chatas that they brought. The chatim is beach. So Rashi says in Parshas Tetzaveh that the reason there was a chatas is because maybe some people brought gzela in the donations, stolen things to give to the need. But he brings here, Isaac Sher brings that the Ramban in Parshas Tzav on the pasuk Be'chates and Mizbeach talks about the same exact thing in Parshas Tzav. He says he brings the Ramban. Madua viu karm chatas. Why did they have to bring in karm chatas? What did they do wrong? What's the reason for chatas? So he says Shema. He's quoting a Ramban, I believe. He says I don't know if it's exact lashon here, but he says Shema b'shas b'shah shiyotza hakruz, when it came out the announcement lisnadev leMishkan, to give to the Mishkan. Dacha ko ish aisha lahavi shloibrit sainam. Maybe somebody was pressured to give it, even though they weren't willing to really part with that money. So tehei kapar zu. This should be a kapar shlo yisnadvu davar gazel lemigdash. Right. That's what he's bringing out from this Ramban. It's being medayik in the Ramban that it doesn't mean gezel mamish. The Ramban didn't learn that they were afraid that they took zela, but if they didn't give it with their whole heart, there's some little, like you didn't want to part with the money. That's also, it's not money you really wanted to give completely. So he says it's hard to understand that the Dor Midbar we see by David HaMelech, they were matzliach. David HaMelech said Aedis that they did it with a whole heart and with a simcha gedola. And here they brought a karmachatas because maybe somebody didn't do it with a whole heart. So first he says a very deep thing. He says that the heart is very deep, he says. He brings from he says, the only way I can explain it, he says, is with the aside that we learned from Rishol Salanta. He says that sheyesh b'nefesh ha'adam koiches pnimiyim v'chitzoniim. There's things in our hearts, in our nefesh, that are more outward, more inside. V'yesh pnimius lepnimius. Ad in cheker. There's deeper and deeper in a person's heart. Ad l'darga shrak Hashem boichin kleis v'leiv. Only Hashem really knows. Maybe we don't even know. Only Hashem knows what's deep in our heart. He says that's how deep the heart is. He says. And he says, David HaMelech asked, Shkios miyavin ministeres nakeni. That he says, David HaMelech said, I can't go into the depths of everybody's heart. I don't know, sort of weak. But in Dar Midbar, it seems because they want a higher madrega, there was a tzad to be done on that premius of a premius. Something like that he wants to say. That's he wants to say a pshat. That since there was such a high madrega, so there it had to be completely pure, deep down. So it was needed at that time a karm chatus for this. But in any case, but he's bringing out the Indian of the Yeshivas Halev has to be with the whole heart. That's what he's bringing out here. And then he says another interesting thing here. He brings, it's nice to know what the davening is about. There's another pasuk that we say in davening in Avodat Zion. We say the pasuk is. I don't want to get mixed up, but he says, Hashem lekei Avram Yitzchak v'Yisrael v'Seinu. We do mention Avram Yitzchak Yisrael. Shomer zayis la'olam. Keep this, protect this forever. Li'etz ha'machshavos levav mecha, to the machshavos that are in the hearts of our people. V'hachin levav melecha. This pasuk, what is this all about? This pasuk. So it's right here. It's right in the same. This pasuk we say that Vavar David is one part of davening, but in the Avodat Zion at the end of davening we throw in another pasuk over here. So if Isaac Sher explains this, what is this pasuk about? So he says, we're asking Hashem. He says to David HaMelech. Let's go to the source. David HaMelech was saying in this pasuk that the Yidden were in such a high madrega now that they had this nidivas halev. They with a simcha to give to the base of Mikdash. So he said, Hashem, Elokei Avraham Yitzchak Yisrael v'Seinu, Shomer zayis la'olam. Keep this forever. This liyetz ha'machshavos levav mecha v'hachin levav melecha. The whole in the future, protect this forever. This level of nidivas halev that they had, and help them keep this to some extent. Help them keep this level of leiv. So he says over here, Rav Isaac Sherek says it in regard to us. He says, we say this pasuk when we're at the end of our davening, at the end of Kedusha, the Sidra, that's Avodat Zion. Listen to what he says here. We're asking from, we're pleading, by repeating this pasuk, we're pleading from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Maybe there was at least one moment in our tefillah, belev sholim. Maybe we had a moment with our heart really into the davening, misalis hanefesh. Sheyishma lanu HaKadosh Baruch Hu regez el olam. Maybe in my davening today, I had one moment that it was really, my whole heart was in the davening. Shenezem HaKadosh Baruch Hu tamid. Hashem should help me always, just like He helped me at that moment. That's what he learns. That's what he says.
That's what we end davening with.
End of davening, we say we're using this tefillah in case we had a good moment in our davening. Hashem should help us have that again. Shomer zayis la'olam. We should be able to daven like that again. So that's just like it was very beautiful shtickle here that the Divas Halev that in this week's parsha that Hashem asked us to give donations. He didn't want just donations. It had to be with our heart, and a complete heart, one heart. You said like one lay. And this is what they were successful by the David HaMelech. And here there was the ruachhatorah in case they didn't have this level. And then we say this also. We ask for our davening. We should result it to this. So this is okay. This is the Indian in the Divas Halev. In this week's parasha, we have another similar phrase. Nesoi libay.
Right, go back to Rambam now.
It says like this: "Vayivayu kol ish asher nesoi libay." After Moshe Rabbeinu made in this week's parsha sort of an appeal that they should bring for the Mishkan, By Avoyu, they brought Kol Ish Asher Nesoy Liboy, V'chol Asher Nodva Ruchai Oisai. There's two, it talks about two types of people. A person whose heart lifted him, Nesoy Liboy, and a person who has a generous spirit. They brought Trumas Hashem. So Archaim HaKodesh says on this pasuk, he says, Yesh dak yesh shtei hadrogos b'misnadvin. There's two levels of people who give donations. He says, Ho'echad, one type of person is who misnadv b'rtzoi nafshay kifi yachaltoi erech mamoinai. One person is a generous person. He gives willingly, according to his ability, according to how much he has. And that's called Nod Veruchai. He has a generous spirit. But he says, and that excludes someone who does it with a hard feeling. Lishlel, that means it excludes Sheina Oisa Dava Kamait Tsar Benafshay. He's not doing it feeling bitter about it. He has a generous spirit and he's giving generously. It's a big level. Vasheni, there's another level, Nesoi Libai, he says, Hua Misnadev Yoisem Yechaltai. He gives even more than he's able to give. Megaidel Toivius Libai. He has such a good heart. That's Nisoy Libai. His heart lifted him up, he has an uplifted heart, that it raises him to give above his ability. Pirish Shalev Minaseu. His heart lifts him. Umarichoi Be'erach Asher Yois Mashu. It makes him feel wealthier than he really is, and he gives more than he's able to give. And he says that's what and he makes a diak in the pasuk. It says, Vayavo, they came, these two groups came. Called Ish Asher Nesoy Libai. Here he uses the term Ish. Every man whose heart lifted him up. V'chol Asher Nod Verufai. And everyone that had a generous spirit. Doesn't give him the title Ish. He says the Torah is being medayik, this the level, this higher level gets an honorable title, Ish. Ish Asher Nesoy Libai. This is where Chaim HaKodesh learns it too. Both are talking about donations and generous people, but it's making two levels amongst the generous people. The Ramban that Burstein has Mechavan here, the Ramban says it's not talking about donations. One is talking about donations, and one is talking about the people who did the work. You needed people to do the crafts, to make all the things for the Mishkan. So the Ramban says that Nod Veruchai Netivus is going on donations, generous people, generous hearts. Nesoy Libai means they were lifted up to do the work. So Ramban is beautiful. Ramban, he says that this lashon. What is in Nesoy Libai? So he says no one here had any training for this work. When were they ever trained to do this kind of delicate, all kinds of work with gold, with threads, with? They worked in Mitzrayim with the bricks and cement. They didn't have any training at all for this. So he says, not one person had a teacher for this. Anyone had any experience. He felt that Moshe Rabbeinu said we're going to need people to do this various types of work. And some people felt, I think I could do that, even though I never did it. I feel I could do it, and his heart lifted him up to the courage and the enthusiasm and the willingness to undertake it. He said, he felt a certain courage, a certain gaiva, gaiva the kedusha. I will do whatever you ask. So that's a level of Nesoy Liba, that a person sometimes there's a need for something and a person feels he could do it. He will do it. He could accomplish this. That's big believe Derech Hashem.
We were talking about this last night. Is this like I think you once said a hundred savos that if a guy has a natia to do something, that's what he should do.
Yes.
So we were talking about, is this what
it sounds like that? Yeah, I didn't think of that, but that sounds like in line with that.
I said over there when you said
yeah.
HaTorah, not about Yeshiva.
Yeah, the Chavos Vavis in Shar B'Tachin talks about what occupation a person should choose. He says what he feels is his skill or what he's Some people for heavy labor. Some people.
That pasuk is saying.
Yeah, but here a person here they were looking for certain types of abilities, and the person felt that he.
But that means Hashem gave him the siyata d'shmai, or is that the same thing? Is he quoting that pasuk is just to make it more geschmack, or that? I'm not sure.
So why the Ramban calls that pasuk?
Yeah, Ramban.
No, I mean it took a certain gaiva that a person could undertake.
Was that because like the Chavzavos, or that's because that they, I don't know.
To me, it sounds like a combination that the person felt. I think I could do that kind of work, but it took courage to step up in the. Yeah. It's off. I think I once mentioned this, so as I'm reading this, I can't help. It comes to my mind.
No problem.
But my father's Chayil Levracha was a bar mitzvah boy. Before bar mitzvah, the war broke out in Europe. I must have mentioned this.
I said this.
Yeah, my grandfather was a malamed in the cheder, and he figured my father as a boy is going to need some kind of skill now. The war's coming, so he knew a shoemaker somehow, and he knew, and he took my father to the shoemaker. He asked him a favor if you could give him a little bit of training, and he gave him a little bit. He gave him some. I don't know how much it would have been, but there was a point in time when my father was in the concentration camp, and they asked people if you have a skill. If you have a skill, they put you to work, and they could use you. Otherwise, they don't need you. So my father had the courage to say he's a shoemaker. That's what to save his life. He said he's a shoemaker.
I said the same thing last
Yeah,
night.
but they
didn't
didn't.
Say about your father. I said that a lot of people were in the concentration camp. Who's a cook? And the guy said, "I'm a cook."
This this I know from my father. So but they didn't just take his word for it. They took him to the place where they had this working on the boots or shoes, whatever it was, and there was a real shoemaker there, and he gave my father a shoe, and there were all the tools hanging there. And he said to my father, "Take the tool that you need to fix the shoe. Let's see what you know." And my father actually, Baruch Hashem, was a handy person. I don't take after him in this, but he did select the right tool. But that saved at that time, that saved his life. But here they had no training. My father had a drop of training. He gave him the courage, and his life was on the line. But here, nobody's life was on the line. Here, no one had training. Here was for the mitzvah. Hashem needed people to do the work in the Mishkan. Moshe Rabbeinu made an appeal for people to step up, and there were people in the soil Libai. I have here, looking last night, I have here a little book that I was a Rebbe in a Torah. So there was the Menal is not alive anymore. Chaim Ayin Weinberg, a very special person. So there's a little book that he gave out at one of the dinners that he wrote, and on every parasha. And this parasha, he has a little. Usually brings a little story, and then he says a word, So he has on. I looked at it last night. So he has on the Soy Libai. He brings a story that I'll share with you. He said. It says that after the Holocaust, it said in 1946, there were Yidden that found themselves in Bucharest, in Romania, and it was before Pesach. And the Skolena Rebbe, I still remember him, the old Skolena Rebbe after the war. He came to America, so he was there, and he was able to somehow get an oven and flour to make handmade shmur matzahs for Pesach. There was no factories then didn't have what we have today. But he was able to get hold of something to make some matzahs. And people started coming, they heard about it, people started coming to ask for matzahs for Pesach. So he made a ration, he didn't have much. He said each person that came, they gave him three matzahs. For the Seder, you need 3 matzahs. That's what they gave out at this he was giving out, or whoever his gabbai was there giving it out. So another Rebbe came, Baruch Hager. It says he was the future Yeshiva of Seret in Haifa. He was called the Seret Visions Rebbe. In any case, he came and he insisted on getting 6 matzahs. And they explained to him that, sorry, that's not enough for everybody. We can only give you 3. But he wouldn't give up. And they gave him 6 matzahs. Give him 6 matzahs. Erev Pesach, this Rebbe that got the 6 matzahs came back with 3 matzahs to return 3 matzahs. So they asked him, what are you doing here? So he said, this is for the Skolena Rebbe. I'm pretty sure he gave away all his matzahs, and he didn't save anything for himself. That's why I asked for 6. I knew he was going to give away all his matzahs. And sure enough, that was true. So he says this story is, you see Nesias Lev. In his way, he's bringing out the Nesias Lev, that just, where did the Skolena Rebbe get the heart to give away every last matzah? That's a special heart. He's going with a special heart. And where did this other Rebbe get the heart to understand this Rebbe and to realize what he's going to do and how to help him? So you bring out 2 tzaddikim had a different kind of heart than other people have. That is special. That's what he called Nesias Lev. I also saw from Rav Palm something, how he applies Nesias Lev. He says, we also in this parasha we know about Betzalel. It's brought down. He had chachmas. He had an extra chachma. So it says Palm brings here a medrash tanchuma. He says that, but says that Hashem says about Betzalel, but Mali Oisei Ruach Lekim b'Chachma, that I gave him Chachma. Betzalel had Chachma. So the medrash says Shekfar Hoisa by Chachma. It seems he already had Chachma, and Hashem gave him more Chachma. L'amedcha, that's somebody medayik in the pasuk. L'amedcha teaches us She'ena Kodesh Baruch Hu Mamali Chachma El Mi Sheyesh B'Kfar. Hashem only gives Chachma to someone who already has Chachma. And the Medrash says Vaita, Matruna Achas, some fancy big lady, asked Rabbi Yosef ben Chalafta, there's a pasuk in Daniel, Yohav Chachma Sol Chakimin. This pasuk, the mamish what we just said in the Medrash, the Medrash brings this pasuk in Daniel that says Hashem gives Chachma to Chachamim. So she asked Rabbi Yosef ben Chalafta, isn't it better to give Chachma to Tipshin? The Tipshin HaYotzerchlim, someone who has no brains, you give him Chachma. What do you give him Chachma to Chacham? And what does it mean for Chacham? Amalah, he said, so he answered it like this. If Hashem would give Chachma to Tipshin, they would sit in the voice, and they would sit in the streets and in the bathhouses, and they wouldn't use the Chachma. It'd be a waste to give the Tipshin the Chachma. Avulnas HaKadosh Baruch Hu Chachamim, Hashem gives Chachma to Chachamim, Shiv Yeshim Yeshivas Zakenim, but the Knesset, but Midrashes V'Aiskim, but he gives Chachma to someone that's going to use the Chachma properly, not just in a waste of Chachma. So that's the Medrash. So the Rapam says, didn't really answer the kasha. I mean, where do you get the first Chachma from? And you give him the second Chachma, like give someone who doesn't have Chachma, give him the Chachma to get started. How do you get started here? He says. So he wants to say like this, that V'yesh Leima, do you know what the answer is? What the first Chachma is? Yesias Halev Lidresh Levakish Chachma. A person his heart lifts him up that he wants Chachma. That's Reish's Chachma. Maybe he doesn't have the Chachma yet, but he has a desire for Chachma. That's what it means. He says, and he brings a pasuk in this week's parsha. Mikri Moli Dirba Kasa Parsha Vayakal, Vayikra Moshe El Betzalel, Vel Aliyav, Vel Kol Ish Chacham Lev, Asher Nosan Hashem Chacham B'Liboy. Hashem, and he called those that have Chachma. Then the pasuk continues, Kol Asher Nesoy Liboy Lekarva Lamalacha. These last few words are in bold print. Kol Asher Nesoy Liboy. Who are these people? The people whose hearts picked them up, Lekarva Lamalacha. They wanted to come to the Malacha. The people whose hearts desired to do the Malacha, those people are the people that Hashem put Chachma in their heart. And he says, Shlomo Melech, he brings the pasuk now, Mishlei, Reishis Chachma, Kenei Chachma. The beginning of Chachma is to desire Chachma, like Kinyan. Do you want to get a Kinyan of Chachma? So for Palm over here says, L'chein, Uvechein. Someone who has a cheshik, he says, to Liskasher, B'kesher HaTorah, someone who wants to get a connection to the Torah, he should never give up, he says. If he has a desire, he'll get there. He said, if a person, the main thing is the desire. If a person wants, then Hashem will give him the chachma. That's what he learns. Yav chacham l'chachimin. That if it has to be a desire for chachma, a person has a desire for it. So this is how he that's his angle on in the soil liboy. His heart lifted him up in this regard. He told me in regard to desiring chachma. There's okay. It says over here also that by Betzalel, L'Hairos Nasam Beliba, Hashem gave him the ability to teach L'Hairos. So there's Archaim HaKodesh will be Makatzes like that. Archaim HaKodesh says not every person that has Chachma can give over the Chachma. Somebody might be very wise, knowledgeable, but he's not a good teacher. But he said Betzalel was L'Hairos Nasam Beliba, that he was a good teacher. So I heard once a kasha that someone asked about this, is because they say over Reb Chaim Briska that if I'll say in Yiddish, as it felt in Hasbara, felt us in Havana, something like that, along those lines. That if a person can't explain it, it means he doesn't understand it himself. He said, if a person can't give it over, it means he doesn't know it. That's what Reb Chaim said. So here sounds like not like that. He's saying Reb Chaim Kodesh says there's some people that know a lot, but they can't give it over. But Salah was able to give it over. It sounds like there are people that can't give over. And Reb Chaim Brisker seems to have said that if you can't get it over, it means you don't have it yourself. So I heard that Reb Elia Ber Wachvogel gave a teretz. I heard in his name that he gave an answer, a very nice, simple answer. He said that what Reb Chaim Brisker meant is a person who could teach. He's able to teach usually, but he's stuck. He can't give this over. This piece he can't give over. So if you can't give it over, it means you don't know it, because you could give things over. But there definitely are people who just can't give over. That's what they can't. Whatever they can't be masad themselves. They can't organize. They don't have to present it. Whatever it might be. But he says that's not. He answered this kasha, and there is Avada is correct, but it says Chaim HaKodesh says that not every chacham it could be a malamed. L'Hoyer is nothing believed by that. Betzalel was able to give over. Chaim Brisker said if you can't give it over, it means you don't know it. He means someone who has a talent to give over other things, and this particular thing he can't give over, that means this thing he doesn't understand, because otherwise he is capable of giving it over. And in the last 2 minutes, I just want to tell you a little last word. I heard once from Nosson Bachfogel, his father. I heard directly from Nosson Bachfogel, that in this week's parish in the beginning, it says, Vayakul Moshe, the Moshe gathered everybody in. He spoke to them about Shabbos, spoke about the Mishkan, and it's a few psukim. And then at Sheni, the last passage before Sheni, it says, "Vayetzu kol das bnei Yisrael l'fnei Moshe." When Moshe Rabbeinu finished, they left. So what else they're going to do? I mean, they're going to stay there. When 1 o'clock, we're going to be out of here. It's not like Vayetzu. What is that? What is the pasuk that when he finished speaking, they left? So the Mepharshim has learned that it means they left immediately to do what he asked them to do. Zrizas, that's what they were saying. But Nosson Bachfogel told me a different shot. I do not recall if he said it from over someone else or it was his own word. He said it means a different thing completely. It means when someone, let's say, somebody goes to a wild party. When he walks out, you can see on the guy's face that he's, where he's been, what the person's been through. Doesn't look too masuda, so But if someone came to Moshe Rabbeinu and you heard Moshe Rabbeinu speak, and then when he went out, anybody that sees the people coming out, they said these people were just by Moshe Rabbeinu. They could see. So he says, "Vayetzu kol das bnei Yisrael l'fnei Moshe." When they went out, you could see where they had been. So he told me, he said that when someone that learns in a yeshiva, it has to be noticeable on him that he's coming from a yeshiva. When he goes out from the yeshiva, people should see this is a yeshiva. This is a yeshiva ben Torah. The way he acts, the way he talks, the way he does. That's That's what he said. That's the limud that we're supposed to take from this. Okay.
Says Shmuz says. So let's the Bible for